Good evening, everybody. As far as the activities that are going on in the township, we always invite you to visit our website to get caught up on our police blotter, our current crimes, whatever. But today I'd like to focus on something a little bit different, the good things that are happening in the township. This season, we are participating in 2 charities. Welcome you to join us in. The first one is Toys for Tots. We have a receptacle in our lobby, and we have Jason Lang to thank for our participation. We did it many years ago, but our Marine had retired, and we realized that we had a new Marine in our department, and he volunteered to take up the calls. And please, if you have a toy, new, unwrapped, drop it in our lobby. And the second charity drive is something we've been doing for many, many years. It's called One Warm Coat. And anybody who has a new or gently used coat, scarf, mittens, hat, etc., please, again, reach out to us. I understand there is a receptacle downstairs in the lobby of this building too. Nobody should be cold in a place like Chester County. We have so much generous people, and we appreciate everybody's participation. And the other thing that I'd like to point out, we've announced it on our website, our Facebook, and tonight I'd like to push it out even more. I brought some flyers with me. It's called Report It. And it is a free online program that allows you to register your valuables. You go on, you create an account, you create the password, and then you keep a running list of all the valuables, whether it's serial numbers, model numbers, photographs, whatever. If you're ever the victim of a burglary or a devastating fire in your building, you will have all the information you need to, number one, make an insurance claim, and number two, if it's a theft, you'll help the police, because model numbers and serial numbers are what drive our databases. So if you have that information, we can check pawn shops, we can go basically online around the nation and look for your property that was stolen. So those are the 3 things that we're doing. So I'm going to leave the flyers. Rick, can I leave with you?
Yep.
And are there any questions?
Chief, I have a question on that. Who handles the like the software and so forth as far as hackability? Who runs it?
It's called Leads Online. It is a company that we use. Basically, our detectives use it to find leads. We plug in serial numbers, partial things, and it's a secure database. I can't guarantee that anything is hack-proof anymore, but the company is very reputable. They've been around a long time helping police departments solve crimes. Because it's one of those things that if we find that there's a trend, like for example, one of the big trends that surfaced is individuals would go into a large supermarket and they would steal things like baby formula. They would then drive into places like Wilmington or Philadelphia and sell it to mom and pop shops. They wouldn't ask where they came from, they didn't care. They would give them pennies on the dollar and allow them to support their drug habit. But it was through sharing information that we were able to identify some of these people and make arrests. So Leads Online is a good program. We've been a member of them for at least 7 years. So, again, so many people get frustrated because they say, well, if I store it in my house and there's a fire in my house, what good does it do me? This is online, it's cloud-based, and it's secure. You set your password. So it's a good program. We're looking forward to people using it and protecting themselves, because it makes you feel a little less like a victim when you can do something to proactively catch the people that made you a victim.
There is an article in the newsletter in this newsletter about Report It. So
Thank you.
Good job, John.
He's always ahead of the curve. Any questions from anyone else?
Thank you,
Well,
Chief.
thank you, Chief. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you. You too.
You're going to be safe.
I'm headed to the county meeting.
Put in a good word for open space, if you would, Chief.
Okay, Chairman's report. The Board of Supervisors is looking for residents to fill vacancies on the Pipeline Task Force, Conservancy Board, and the Historical Commission. We have received the Pennsylvania DEP and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer permits for the Hershey's Mill Dam. C, do you have anything to say about that?
I do.
If you ever want to see a letter from a bureaucracy that is bigger than ours, that tells you you've been approved but you're not, in the most bureaucratic language you could ever imagine, and it was online, just take a read, and then put yourself down in Washington and think about how your public comment would be affected down there when you see this kind of stuff.
Thank you, Mike. PennDOT has opened bids for the Paoli Pike Trail segments C, D, and E.
Excellent,
Yes,
Excellent.
and we're pleased with that.
excellent.
Yeah, so there's $295,000
Yes.
under budget. So
Under
we
budget.
can, just to clarify, we can use that extra money, that savings, to pay for the inspection portion too. So, remember that $570,000 nest egg that we had is now $865,000.
Cool. Okay, we will have any public comment on non-agenda items. If you have a comment, please come up, state your name and address.
Brian Coco, 633 North Speakman Lane, Westchester, PA. And Rick, this is directed to you. I just reached out to Joe McGann from Sun about a week or so ago and wanted to see if it's in line with what your latest information. He advised me that right now they're still looking for the dual pool for New Kent in December, and but the one along the Bow Tree development will not be completed to next spring. Now, I've noticed within the last couple out to drill, and they have a much larger drill out there. And interestingly, I see later on in the agenda you're talking about a noise ordinance, and Bill Webb and myself were just talking. I don't know exactly what they're doing over there now, but the noise today is twice as loud as it's ever been. My house was shaking, things were rattling. I'm not exactly sure what they're doing, but I've got my fingers crossed that, you know, they're getting closer to the end.
So with the one from New Kent to Wellington, now New Kent to the Executive Center, they did bring in a bigger machine because obviously they need it for the dual pullbacks. They're currently in the reaming phase, where they're trying to make the pole big enough, 42 inches to pull both pipes. They expect that they will have it finished by the end of the year, and in which case then they will, then they'll do the dual pullbacks. Right now, it's still a candidate for dual pullbacks. Until they get the hole finished and they do a final inspection, they're not 100% sure. But right now, that one is still looking good for a dual pullback, which would then mean that between the Executive Center and New Kent, those pipes will be installed. At the one at Bow Tree that's going to the Catholic Church, again, they're in the reaming phase, going up to 42 inches, and basically it's the exact same situation. That is a candidate for a dual pullback. Right now, it still looks good. At the end, when the final hole is complete, if it's still suitable, they'll do a dual pullback, and that is a little farther ahead than the one from New Kent to Executive Center. So I think that one will go first. And again, they're looking at the end of December, early January.
Okay.
They still have to come back, and there's a section from the old driveway that went into the Bow Tree Farm, when it was a farm, up to New Kent. There's still a missing section of 20-inch that has to go to get put in. So they won't be able to finish that up until they put that section in. And they did recently, they've been doing some work down there. They're in the process of they'll start bringing in the pipe and welding up the 2 length sections of pipe for the pullback from Bow Tree down to the Catholic Church. So you'll see them start laying out pipe, welding it up, and getting all those pipe strings in.
Okay, so hopefully, and obviously things can change on weather or everything else, but basically then we're looking at, knock on wood, the spring of 2020, we should be finished.
I think, Sunoco has said that they're gonna have a 16-inch line in place by the end of this year, and those placed in service by the end of next year. They will not be able to meet the 16-inch line simply because they got areas where they can't get the permits. DEP is not authorized to issue permits on the 16-inch line. So I would expect that the 16 will bleed over till sometime in 2020, but I think it is possible they could have both 16 and 20 completed by the end of next year.
Okay.
But they have some gaps in East Goshen where they have to come back and fill in and do the 20. For instance, between the shopping center and the Quaker site, they need to pull the 20 underneath that driveway. From the Quaker site down to the executive center, they need to install a section of 20 in there. And then from the New Kent to the old Bow Tree driveway, you still have to do that section.
So I guess what you're saying, then there's no short-term cleanup for New Kent either then, even though
My understanding is they are going to be able to start doing some cleanup out there in front of Wellington on the north end. Because again, they only have like a couple 100-foot section that goes underneath the driveway, underneath the sign, and pops back up the Quaker. So the northern part of that, they're going to start putting that back together. That'll be the first section. But then once they get that little section under the driveway done, and I believe that's their first priority 20 in the section of East Goshen. So you get the shopping center back into operation. But everything else is going to wait till the last little pieces.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ron, what it means is you have to have your Christmas party for the work this year.
I'm sorry.
You have to have a Christmas party for your work this year.
Well, actually, it's a lot more important to me than it's ever been because I'm moving, so I don't want to put my house on the market until this is done. So I have even a more of a vested interest in it.
Well, there's an interesting thing that happened. I got a call from a fellow at the other end of the tree. Marty. Well, it doesn't go on anyway, so I just have to honest. Oh, how about that? Put your lips on. There's a fellow at the other end, his name Eric, somebody or other. They had the same problem that you described. And it's very possible it's because they're using a bigger head to get the bigger hole that Ricky's talking about. So we're trying to check on that to see if that's true. If it does, and they are willing to do something, it would be very nice. If they're not, then I suggest anybody chooses to, they file a complaint with the commission. Because that's the only way it's going to get taken care of, if it gets taken care of at all.
Well, I would venture to say, because it's already been tested in my yard with a smaller drill. Absolutely today, and I think Bill would agree, the noise today is way over the noise ordinance. I mean, it's just almost deafening. That's how loud it is.
My question is then, do we want to get out there and test it? I mean,
Yeah,
we're hearing a complaint from a resident, I think we should.
I can have to go back out.
We gotta
We ought
spend
to.
money, but
Yeah.
if it will provide some sort of mitigation for effort by Sunoco, I think we should be doing.
I mean, God knows I don't want it to stop, but the noise is loud. Thank God now my windows are closed and I'm hard of hearing anyway, but it's pretty loud.
Well, let's see if we get some readings, and if you can coordinate, Ron, and let them know when you're hearing that, depending on how they stage, so we
Well,
can
it
make
was
it.
most of all day today, and it's been off and on. It's not continuous like it used to be with a small drill, but whatever they're doing, I don't know whether it's because the drill's actually running or whatever, but it's loud.
Could just be squeaky rock. I mean.
I'd like to include New Kent if you're going to do any readings, Rick.
Well, that would be the site that'd be measured.
Let's say, Russ.
What's that?
Yeah, Russ Frank, 451 Gateswood Drive. Rick, question for you is, I thought that Sunoco wanted to put a valve behind the Sunoco station on Boot Road.
No,
And we discussed that.
No.
Well,
No.
you know where the, I said I thought, you know where the veterinary clinic is on
Right.
Boot Road?
Yes.
Right across there, looks like there's two sections of what looks to me to be potential valves.
No, I think what you're seeing is the fitting they put on the end when they pressure test the pipe.
It would go through the
Yeah,
ground?
because they get cut off.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
All right.
that's just for the equipment they use it when they test it.
okay,
pressure test
thanks.
Any other comments on non-agenda items? Come up and give your Give your name and address, please. No, at the mic.
You've already sent them. Well, this is different. I'm not gonna read this. We can only do a copy. We can listen.
This is the gentleman from Berks County.
No,
Honeybrook, how are you?
very good, thank you.
I appreciate you coming out tonight.
Thank you. Henry Zawada from Alberson, Honeybrook Township. It's a nice audience. I've been through larger audiences at the other townships.
Do you know Gary McEwen out there?
Pardon
You know Gary McEwen out there in
Yes.
Ellerson?
He's a neighbor.
All right, then we're gonna hold you in good stead then tonight, go ahead.
John McHugh, who was with me last night and also at other meetings from Honeybrook Township, is supporting me 100% on this. Originally, I went to the Honeybrook Township meetings to talk about a cancer cluster in my neighborhood. And it's unrelated to the Sunoco project because what I found out in my neighborhood, I went door to door one Saturday and found out there's cancer everywhere. Prostate, breast cancer, lung cancer, colon cancer. And I have various people looking into it. Jan Bowers from Water Resources, Janine Kasner from the Health Department, and the last person I met with was Conservation Director. His name was Christian Stolmeyer. And they're looking into my neighborhood. And along with the commissioners, Michelle Ketchline and Kathy Corzine and Terrence were aware of it before the election came. I'm here on my own volition, as I told John in my email, and I visited the townships of Upper Euclid last night, which was a long meeting, 3 hours long. I didn't get to speak till like 10 o'clock. And I was shot down in the beginning when I stood up because local residents, like these residents, had to speak first, so I had to defer. And my chance didn't come till like 10 o'clock. But that's all right. I mean, I've been to the Euclid Township before that. I'm scheduled for Middleton, Delaware County Township next Monday. And I met this fine person here tonight because John mentioned the Pipeline Task Force is meeting on December 5th. And John gave me the name of Carolyn Hughes, and I'd be happy to attend.
Good.
That one. What I'm here to discuss from the other townships, one Sunday I went to church in Morgantown, and I decided to take a drive north up through Berks County. The area I'm talking about is like 8 miles from my house in Elverson, and it's behind the Twin Valley School, and I happened to speak with that principal at Twin Valley, Mr. Clemens, about this whole matter, and I keep him abreast. He has the pipelines going behind Twin Valley School, up from all of the rural townships through 401, going up behind the school. And I happened to start knocking on neighbors' doors to find out where this pipeline is heading west. Because eventually it goes north and then it hooks west towards Lancaster, the 350-mile line going to Ohio. I happened to come across a couple neighbors that had silk fences, I guess to catch runoff. If there's an explosion or a leak, I took pictures of it. It's just amazing what they did. On one property, they took all of his trees in the back, and this one neighbor signed a lease with Sunoco. I can't say how much it was, but he signed a lease for the 2 pipes. Like we have where I'm at in Elverson, we have the 2 older pipes that are dated 1995 and 2001. These are the older pipes. But the pipes that this one resident had in Berks County had the 3 Mariner pipes on his property, which he did not agree to. And he's taken them to court in December because he agreed only to the 2 older pipes. So Mariner 1 2 and 2X showed up on his property. So he's got 5 pipes going through his property. And a lot of these neighbors up there did not ask for that. And I've been speaking with attorneys, my own attorney in Paoli, and also an attorney in LA who's handling the Monsanto cases for Roundup. Also talking with an attorney in Hershey who's handling a Supreme Court case with this Sunoco meth. And what I found out at one resident, there was an accident with one of these pipes. I didn't get all the specifics, but I spoke with him for at least an hour. And the way he described it a couple times to me, he said that a pipe burst and somehow Sunoco came and looked at it and did the repair and cleanup. And I asked this homeowner, who's in his 70s, I said, can you describe what happened? He said, well, when these NGLs, the natural gas lines, butane, hexane, and propane, when they leaked, that's what it was. The gentleman said when it evaporated, hit the air, it created some kind of residue on the property, which was about 60 yards in diameter. So there was some residue left on the land. And I asked him, I said, what else did they do? He said they came and repaired the pipe, put some kind of material around it and laid it back in. And then I asked him, I said, what did they do about the soil? You know, because it had to be contaminated. And he said they cleaned it up. And that was it. I mean, he didn't have any news. He didn't have any attorneys. He didn't have PUC. No one came to talk about it.
Excuse me, sir. What, I may be getting ahead of you, but what do you want from this board?
Well, as I told John in my email, I'm talking to all the townships to explain the word transparency.
Well, perhaps the better way to do it would be to speak to our pipeline task force. Christina is involved because they are the ones that sift through all this information and make recommendations to this board.
Okay.
And they are probably better versed in it than hearing your story and taking care of
Janet,
it.
can I speak as vice chairman for the task force? I'd like to give another 5 minutes to speak. Finish.
Okay.
Thank you, appreciate it. I've been communicating regularly with a specific department at Penn State and State College. I've had a professor on the phone for an hour, and they specialize in soil management, and it's called the Department of Ecosystem Science and Management. They're the SME, subject matter experts for the whole state of Pennsylvania, and they handle studies throughout the state regarding contaminated wells, soil problems, nitrogen, runoffs, agriculture. They've been communicating with me every week. And what I heard at one conversation one Friday just threw me off. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Because I explained as one professor, I said, the person who analyzed our water on October 4th, it was a Friday in October, came and tested our water, which doubled, our numbers doubled from when we moved 20 years ago into the property. And we're talking about nitrates and coliform and some other stuff. My neighbors had the same thing. Their numbers just doubled or went off the charts. And the standard number is 10 ml, and everyone had theirs higher than that. Well, this analyst who's in his young 30s told me he's being sent from the Reading office, MJ Ryder, to Lancaster. And he said, the residents in Lancaster are being called to test their wells because they suspect there's carcinogens in their wells. And if you read the paper, page 2 of today's Daily Local, Governor Wolf is facing a deluge of residents who are complaining of some rare children's cancer called Ewing sarcoma. And the governor is looking into it. However, what I'm reading is that there's no study, there's no confirmation of relationship to the Sunoco pipelines. But the professor that I've been communicating with differs with that. because when any of these BTECs, which are butane and chemicals that are used for fracking and drilling, if any of these chemicals are released, these are toxic. And when you hear about accidents along the pipeline, like in East Goshen or in Reading that happened over the last few years, the one thing the professor asked me is, how do they contain it? And I said, I don't know. I didn't know anything about these accidents until now. Like the gentleman in Berks County, he said no one did anything. So basically, he's looking at his property that's contaminated, and they're supplying aqua water to these residents for probably a couple of years or 3 years, because they've had those pipes since 2017. And from what I'm hearing is they're not going to be supplying the water forever for these residents, and they have their wells contaminated. So I'm concerned about your residents.
Absolutely, and certainly we are very concerned about any hazards to our residents, but I think the proper venue is to speak to our pipeline task force and have them do whatever investigation or follow-up that's necessary, and then report back to the supervisors.
I will do that.
Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your concern.
You're welcome.
Bill wanted to talk. You want to talk, Bill?
No, I'm gonna.
I thought you said you want to talk.
I'm gonna talk to him personally.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other comments on non-agenda items? Okay, we'll move on to our emergency services reports. Carmen?
Okay, I would like to, I actually forgot to send it to the township. It was about a week and a half ago, Mr. Shane and I were in Malvern, and there was a dispatch for a barn fire with possible entrapment that we were about a block and a half from. So I responded, and we were the first location. I was able to call in an initial report to forget his name, but the chief of East Whiteland, so that he could get stuff started. Unfortunately, with my back condition, I wasn't able to run into the property to check it further. But at least Mr. Shane had an idea of what happens to the first one person. The reports I'm going to give you are the EMS and fire reports for our township only, starting with Goshen Fire Company. This is for October 2019. They had the fire responses, 19, fire police responses, 12, EMS responses for East Goshen, 170. Malvern had 31 calls, 2 basic life support, and 29 advanced ALS. Good Fellowship had 44 calls, which is 8.4% of their call volume for that month. The reports, I believe, will be online if anybody wants to see them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.
Next, the financial report.
Yeah, I'll keep this really short. As of Halloween, there's a positive budget variance of $447,000 and change in the general fund. I'm not changing any year-end projections, although everything's sort of coming up a little bit roses, not, just a little bit, not a whole lot. So I think there's a chance we could finish right at or even under budget
Cool.
for the year. But I'm not committing to that.
Excuse me, Christina, could you guys move outside if you're gonna talk, please?
John, can you get one of the apartments to sell before the end of the year?
I'll do what I can. So that's really all there is to report here. There's nothing out of the ordinary in the other funds either. So, no news, good news.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Next, approval of the minutes. Are there any adjustments other than the ones that they emailed across?
No.
Okay, then can I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion that we approve the November 12th, 2019 minutes with any email corrections that may have been submitted.
Do we have a treasurer's report?
No, we have
Oh,
minutes.
minutes, oh, sorry.
Minutes, we're just doing minutes.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Numbers on.
Is there a second?
Oh, second, I'll second the,
Marty too.
thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Michael, you left me hanging.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Treasurer's report.
Okay, this is our chance, everybody, I'm sure had a chance to review the invoices. I got through them fairly accurately.
Yeah.
I don't have any concerns. I had a question for Mark, but it was really not part of the batches. But at this time, does anybody have any questions?
No.
Okay, Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion that we graciously accept the receipts and approve payment of the bills on our report once they're approved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It's approved.
Good.
Tonight we have no public hearings, no old business. We'll move on to new business, considering recommendations on a noise ordinance.
Board members, couple months, I guess it was a month ago now, when Sunoco was working late, and then there was an issue about, can we cite them? Well, we could have cited them if we went and took our meter up there and had our engineer measure the noise. Because ours is based on decibels, that kind of stuff. So, I talked to David and the thought was, well, perhaps we'll tweak that section. So being as most townships do, I went to our neighbors next door, and what they do is, for after hours work, basically they say, if you hear it at the property line, it's a violation. So I did made those changes to the ordinance. And there was a couple other things in there that I guess basically didn't make too much sense. And then we do have a permitting thing on the back end where people get exemptions. And while Sunoco has requested and they were denied for that application, we've gotten over the years. You get the, I don't want to say fairly frequently, but you do get the people that daughters get married. We're going to have the wedding service at the house. Boy graduated from college. We're going to have a party at the house. And there's over the people where they want to have the live music or the band and that type of stuff. So we do get them over the years. I know, but we also had a case where there's a gentleman that's having the live band on a fairly frequent basis, and some of his neighbors took exception. So I made some changes to that section about clarifying when they have to submit, that there would be a fee involved because we have to send a letter out to everybody, assuming it's approved. And that there's some expense incurred. Wow. And then the other question that came up, I think Marty noticed to Marty. He noted that we cover noise in our zoning and in our standard noise ordinance. And I explained my logic to Marty why we did it, and he said it was okay. I explained it to our solicitors. He said, well, that don't make any sense. So based on that, I figured Marty was right. So the suggestion would be is that we would take the noise provisions out of the zoning and put them strictly over in the standalone noise ordinance.
Yeah.
Which, as you know, the zoning enforcement tries to get people to bring their property into compliance. It's a process. It's not like you give somebody a ticket, you go to district justice, there's notices. So putting it over into the standalone takes it out of the zoning process. So there's a draft here that I have for you. I do get some additional comments from Kristen that we need to look at. But I guess I was looking, if we're on the right track, we'll pursue it. And
Yeah, I'm supportive of taking it out of the zoning ordinance, putting it in the pure legislative realm as one of our standalone codes. I did want to ask the question, and you alluded to it, Rick. The gentleman who took the time here, fellow citizen Willis and Marjorie Geyer, citizens, about the matter of neighbors that were having essentially their own schedule of various events and music performances on a stage they build on their property. Is this ordinance now, my sense is, from what I read, and this gentleman made some very good points about what he would like the township to be considering. I don't know what he knew about what we're doing presently, that prompted this letter, but I don't think there's such thing as a coincidence, so I'm presuming he knew that we were updating our zoning ordinance, but it looks like we've touched some of the concerns that he expressed here. What's your sense of this letter relative to this draft?
No,
ordinance?
Mr. Iyer was in conversation, well, the neighbor who has the music came in, met with Mark, and Mark approved it, we sent out this letter to everybody within 1,000 feet, Mr. Geyer got it, and he talked to Mark, and we had conversations, and Mark made him aware that we were proposing the ordinance, so he got his letter, I took some of his stuff, I think there was one thing I think he wanted, was someone, rather long period of time, I forget exactly, what it was like 2 weeks or something?
2 weeks notice.
Yeah, my sense is, I think 2 weeks is a little too, I mean, it's possible.
I know, and I'm with
So,
you.
but I think my concern was, under the current ordinance, we had like 2 days. So somebody could come in for a permit, I use the word on Thursday, they wanted to do something on Friday or Saturday. You know, in the construction, sometimes it happens, you know, when you're pouring concrete or something and you need to do it.
Yeah.
But typically on some of these other events, if you're planning a graduation party or a wedding, you usually know a couple days in advance. So Mark and I felt, I think like 5 business days seemed to make sense. So we incorporated took some of his suggestions on all. But I mean, if you believe that we should make it longer than 5 business days.
No, I think 5 is a good.
Yeah,
good
we were trying to
That's a good compliment.
balance the construction schedule, like, you know, we're trying to pour concrete, you gotta start before 7 because of the weather, as opposed to, you know, the guy having the band concert, so.
Rick, I do have a question on the same letter. I did talk to you briefly on it. Thanks, Mike. If this happens on a continual basis, where I'm just reading the letter, it seems like it happens very often. I mean, at some point, there's a possibility we may have, if we get complaints, we're gonna have to deny his permit.
There is a place here, and I was gonna bring this one up, that, because I'm not sure exactly why it is where it is, but it says, no more than 2 temporary permits in a calendar year
Yeah.
will be issued to a specific property for weddings, graduations, or something.
That's
So-
under the loudspeaker, that's where the provision they come in. In other words, conceivably, that you could have 3 kids graduate.
Right.
And,
I
okay,
understand.
but most people, most of the ones that we've got for the wedding or birthday celebrations, you know, they're one and done. You know, one kid graduated, the daughter got married, they had the event.
I just wanna make sure that in the future, if it starts
Oh,
happening,
yeah, no,
that we hold to this.
Yes, oh, yeah.
And so the neighbors aren't continually bothered with
Yes.
music every other weekend or something.
I
More,
don't know why that comes to it.
more to the point,
It's still,
Rick and I had, to say the least, a fairly lengthy conversation on this, and we discovered that there are many things in here that are defined that we don't need them defined because we don't even know what the definition is. And we gotta pare this down to what's relevant to whatever we're doing. And since we're bringing over the zoning ordinance into the chapter 156, you gotta bring over a number of things that are gonna stay, and you have to have measurements and so forth for enforcement, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So if you approach it from that direction, I can assure you there's a monumental amount of work that's going to be necessary to put this into a usable form, making sure that everything's included from 156 as well as from the zoning ordinance in the one section, which would be 156. So I am suggesting that we have Rick and his staff continue to work on this, but this work is going to be a lot more complicated and longer than you would ever expect for something like this, because if we don't measure what needs to be measured and have a legitimate way of doing that, you'll never be able to enforce a noise ordinance in that particular regard. And there's no reason to have definitions for terms that don't have any relevance whatsoever. So Rick and I, well, let me put it this way. It seems like we both agreed that we really need to do that in the long run to make this thing correct. So my suggestion is that we ask staff to do this and come back when they finally get it done, and maybe even run it by the solicitor if that's what before coming to us. And I think it's going to be a better work product because there is a ton of work that really needs to be done.
I have sent the first draft to Kristen, and I got some comments back. So we'll, between myself, Mark Gordon, and Kristen, we'll
Continue working on it.
yeah, we'll get something back to you.
I have a question, Rick, I read through this a couple times. One of the things that brought this to our attention was the fact that a contractor was working in our township beyond 10 o'clock. And it wasn't necessarily a noise complaint. It was, lights and noise and work past 10 o'clock. So this is still labeled as a noise ordinance. If we don't set up noise reading equipment and so on, and there's a contractor working at 11:30 at night in the township with lights and noise, is this still enforceable?
Well, as I've written it, what you have in front of you today, we're basically saying that at 10 o'clock, if I stand on the receiving property across the street or your neighbor's property, I can hear you working and you're in violation.
Okay.
So from that end, that would be.
Okay.
And so we're not really, and I had a conversation with Marty. If you're having on your front porch at 9:59, you're fine. At 10 o'clock, you gotta start hammering. If you're painting inside your house at 9:59, painting with the brush and the roller, and you go to 11 o'clock at night, nobody's gonna know you're painting. So we're not regulating, so, but they're both like, we consider reconstruction. We're trying to regulate the impact, which is noise.
West Goshen has.
This is, I stole West Goshen, but not.
That's what we borrow things, and that's
Good. Have you talked to them about their experience with this ordinance? Have they had issues where they have had a situation where they felt they couldn't enforce it?
They said they were going to cite Sunoco. I don't know if they ever did it.
I like this approach. I recognize that the decibels are a good thing, but that, the bus stops at 9, and after that, you shouldn't be on the road type of thing. That's, I support that. I think that's, if we can refine it and get it into effective form, I think that's good.
Do we need a motion to make? No. Okay, so that's gonna continue working on it and it will come back. Next, we're considering an amendment to the non-uniform defined contribution pension plan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Probably about 2 months ago now, we received the state aid for a state pension aid for both the township's defined contribution plan and non-uniform defined contribution plan and the firefighters defined benefit plan. It was a big jump up from last year. Part of that was due to the 4 new firefighters being certified, but there's also an underlying increase in the unit values of about 9%. So as you know, for the last 3 years, we have been funding the non-uniformed defined contribution plan at 5.5% of wages, whereas the underlying resolution says 5%. Basically, but this proposal just sort of recognizes that yet again this year there's going to be that enough money from the state aid to comfortably fund the non-uniformed pension plan at 5.5% of wages. So additional 0.5%. So you've done a variation on this approved a variation on this resolution for the past 4 years. The only difference with this one is just because clearly there's a trend that there's enough money from the state aid to fund the pension at 5.5% that at the end of this year it doesn't revert back to 5.0%. And also I'd add that last month the pension committee unanimously approved the motion to recommend that the Board of Supervisors adopt this resolution.
Okay.
I'm on the pension committee and there was a bit of discussion, but it was unanimous.
I agree, John and I have had a long conversation about this earlier in the year, and I think it's effective. It's we do not have the most robust pension plan for folks, and this kind of helps a lot in bringing it up to the 5.5 as a threshold as opposed to 5%. And all in favor of it, so I would hope the board would all agree that we need to do this.
Want to make a motion?
And I make a motion to that effect.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Anyone from the floor? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is passed. We have any other matter, John?
Yeah, just two things I want to run past your attention or bring to your attention. They're both related to ponds. Now that the Marydale Pond it's been sort of the township's longstanding policy not that we don't allow ice skating on township ponds. We know just anecdotally that there are kids in the neighborhoods that will occasionally, when there's a cold snap, skate on the ponds, but it's technically prohibited. However, with Marydale being dredged, and going from an average depth of 1 or 2 feet to 8 feet and having an aerator installed in it, it is a legitimately very dangerous, the potential for a catastrophic accident if the ice was to collapse would be much more severe than last year. So Mark Miller has ordered some signs sort of outlining that skating is not allowed. Also, swimming is not allowed. I don't know who would swim in those ponds, but that's another story. And so if you look in the township code, though, the township code doesn't explicitly ban ice skating. It's more been sort of like an informal policy that we don't allow it. But the way that the park and rec section of the township code works is it allows the Park and Rec Commission to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to adopt a resolution to amend the park rules for the township. So I just want to put it out there that it is something that's going to be percolating over the next month. The Park and Rec Board will discuss it, make a recommendation to you. I wanted you guys to be aware that work is starting to get on the Park and Rec Commission's radar. Another thing about the ponds, tentatively, January 14th, we'd like to hold a meeting with the Bowtree residents to talk about the work plans for the Bowtree 1 pond. Technically, that would be, I guess, the Board of Supervisors meeting. So the second Tuesday, if that's agreeable with your schedule, we'd send out a letter to everybody in Bowtree saying, come on, we can explain what the work plan.
What's the night that we're planning to do
The 28th is the annual planning session. Yeah, so this would be the second,
I think it's.
the second Tuesday.
If it's workable within the fact that we're here to begin with, and there's not a whole lot of other stuff to take care of, then I think it's an appropriate thing to do. If there turns out to be one of those meetings where there's a lot of things to do.
No, this would be an off meeting, like a single issue meeting.
I have no problem with
Yeah,
that.
and Nate Klein would lead it, and he.
I have no problem with that. I'm sorry, I thought it was our second meeting.
Michelle, John, you have the planning session in your calendar for the 28th? Good, okay, good. There'll be a lot of other things you'll have in your calendar, just.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to correspondence.
Gina, I'd like to address one issue
Oh, okay.
in the correspondence and maybe percolate it up a little bit. I read with alarm the November 7th, 2019 notice of violation that was sent to us by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection regarding horizontal directional drilling, the elimination of HDD 520, and the lack of transparency to the township, to the state, to the DEP in presenting the required complete geological reevaluation of the entire warpath. The notice of violation was sent to them But the reason I read it with alarm is that work continues there on a dual pull-through, and the DEP has not sent out their investigative and enforcement people. Then I think that they should cease construction until they comply with the Department of Environmental Protection. And so I'm recommending that we contact the DEP and make a request they cease construction until they're in full compliance in accordance with this notice of violation.
That's a motion, I'll second it.
I'll make that as a motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on?
Yeah, Rick, with your history of things like this that have occurred in other areas, is it one of these things that there's an absolute possibility of, or there's a reasonable possibility of success, or is this something they just do to make you feel good?
I don't really care about that. What I'm alarmed about is that we have a small 20-inch by 20-inch hole in another county that they just dumped tons of concrete in. They've had a collapse underneath the subterranean part, and they know nothing about. They've not done a geological survey, and they could have another situation where the road can collapse here. I think I'm going to write her to Carolyn Commit. I'm going to request her to ask for a cessation of drilling in that borehole, and I'd like to have our board support that.
No, I wasn't suggesting at all that we not do it. I was asking if there's the possibility that they would do it, and I think it's nice for you to volunteer to do that, but I think we ought to have staff do it, which is a typical way of doing things. If the board wants to do that, I would certainly be in favor of it.
Okay.
I definitely think they ought to do what they should do. Now the question becomes is, will they do what they should do or not? But nonetheless, I still think
We need to go on record.
absolutely, I think you're 100% correct about that. And I thank you for showing up with a coat and tie on.
Of course, thank you.
Appreciate the fact that you're well best dressed this evening.
If you want to take pictures or anything, because you won't see this again probably for a while.
But I think for people that are interested, this is on the website. It's very interesting to read. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, it gets to be a little bit quirky after a while, but it is the simple fact of the matter is, it is pointing out what I think is an error, and I think you brought it up before, and I think this is the outcome of that, right? Outcome of your efforts, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you should be congratulated for that, and hopefully this will work.
Right, is there any other comment from the board? Anything from the audience? Please come up.
Christina Morley, East Goshen Township. I would like to just say a couple of things about this 3-page notice of violation. First, it's not usual that you see a 3-page notice of violation. I also want to point out that Sunoco didn't hide any of this. This was all in plain sight. This was detailed in a letter that was sent to every single resident that they had combined the drills. They published it on a map that was displayed before all of us and the entire township. And what that should demonstrate to all of us is that they were completely transparent with what they were doing. And they were betting on the fact that nobody was following up on this, nobody was noticing it, nobody was questioning it, and nobody was going to ask a single question about the combining of those drills, about the renaming of that site, about putting 2 pipes through 1 borehole. And the fact is that had I not stood up there and asked Joe McGinn and Larry Greminger why that HDD 520 disappeared, they would have succeeded. And subsequently, I reported them to the lawyers at the Clean Air Council. I reported them to the DEP. I reported them to the Chester County DA's office and to the Delaware County DA's office. And that's why we're here today. And so I'm only one person. I can't keep doing this for every site that's out there, and in every subsequent public comment that I have submitted whether it was for Slitting Mill or for the other one over here. I can't even remember, there's so many. But I keep talking about this, and I keep talking about why Sunoco is allowed to be loosey-goosey with the names of their sites and the numbering of their sites and everything, and it just doesn't go away. And we all have to be doing that. We all have to be reading these documents, and we all have to be asking them why they're doing what they're doing. Because you know what? They didn't tell the DEP anything. And it was a surprise to them that they were gonna put 2 pipes through 1 borehole. So I don't think that it's actually gonna go through there, because now 520 is back on the radar. It's back on the radar for court-ordered reevaluation reporting, and all that geologic testing that I've been asking for over and over and over again, now they have to do it. So I think it goes to show the power of poking that bear over and over and over again. Absolutely, David Shuey, send that letter. Send it to Hohenstein, send it to Alex Baumstein at Clean Air Council. Send it all over the place and ask for that cease and desist. Don't ask for it, demand it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yep.
In a case like this, does the task force get a copy of these violations when they come in?
I don't know.
I'm asking the question.
I only
because
saw it on the
don't know.
agenda. I saw it on the agenda.
Can you answer to that? Do you get a?
I saw it on the agenda as well.
It's on the agenda, that's why we posted.
But what I'm asking is, we have a
Well,
group,
they have no meeting in now until December, so, yeah.
we have a group of residents that are extremely active in this and know what they're talking about. If they are not getting this paperwork, whether they're gonna meet or not, I think they should get a copy.
Okay.
They can communicate offline or online off, however you wanna do it.
Yeah, I
That if-
specifically
but
asked.
The task force, in my opinion, needs to have anything, unless it would be something in a violation of the sunshine law due to some sort of illegal technicality. The task force should get everything, and whether they meet or not or do it offline, I mean, that's up to you guys. But we're sort of, aren't we breaking the fence here? We have people that are doing it as a group, but they're not really being filled in. I'm just asking the question.
I'm happy that I actually even looked on the agenda for tonight's meeting yesterday, and I thought, is there anything that I need to be aware of? Do I need to come to this meeting? And that's where I read, and that's where I saw it. Otherwise, I would not have seen it. And I had specifically asked to be kept aware of anything that was going on with Boat Tree.
Could the board agree that staff would immediately, any notices that we get, that it be forwarded to the task force?
All right, we have a motion on the floor.
That's a motion.
No,
No.
we can't, it can't be a
No,
motion.
The motion's
We have-
for David, for the township to send a letter
And I
to all
second
of the
it.
parties.
Right.
Let me be clear that, the request should be to cease construction at that site until, they're in compliance with the bullet points, on page 2 and 3 of the DEP notice of violation.
And to ask for extensive geologic testing of the entire profile.
Yeah, that's,
He mentions it in a paragraph, but it's not one of the bullet points.
Okay, is that part of the motion? So,
yeah, well, it's, yeah.
so-
Will require complete geological reevaluation
So
of
it's
the
already-
entire
it's already-
forepath, yeah, it's in the letter, so, and then the 2 point.
Yes.
I think there's an overriding issue here. There's the issue here about this particular one. And what we got the end result of the effort. I mean, by the time you get this, something's happened to prompt this thing from happening. It doesn't occur by itself. So I think the bigger issue is we do what you're talking about doing, send a letter and get that thing moving. But at the same time, you want to do something or find out what you should do by either notifying DEP or the PUC or whatever, that this type of situation should not happen in the future to any pipeline that's coming looking along. Because there's a flaw in the system somewhere and it needs to be closed because this is just one of probably many times that this has occurred. And it really, you can't expect people necessarily that to pick it up, even though you would think that might happen. But you want to ensure that the pipeliner is doing what they're supposed to be doing and not trying to game the system. So I think there's a second step here. The first one is to do what you suggested. The second is to try to figure out how we notify the right person to make sure this doesn't happen again, anyplace.
I also want to comment that there, we know there are lots of moving parts, lots of notices, et cetera. The staff does I think a really good job trying to get information out, the website, et cetera. Can we improve it always? But I think overall that with as complicated as this is, individuals like Christina are a great example of the investment that we have with our volunteers and all of us that, every extra set of eyes that's invested makes a difference. So we can close gaps, a lot of moving parts, but keeping eyes on it. So, plaudits again to you, Christina, for digging at this, and as you say, poking the bear.
John, could you read the motion?
Yeah, so what I have is that we send a letter to DEP requesting that that construction be ceased at 520 until Sunoco is in full compliance with the provisions of page 2 and 3 of the notice of DEP's notice of violation.
And you're gonna add the geological study?
Well,
That's part
that's
of-
included
That's
in
included in
page 2.
page 2 and 3.
Okay, that's fine.
And
Okay,
copied to just about everybody you know.
all right. All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Madam Chairman, I suggest that we ask the pipeline task force to look at this situation in totality and see how we should address this with whomever it should be addressed to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Systematic, whether it's a structural flaw, a systematic flaw in your process, whether the pipeline task force can dig into, or whether the pipeline task force can
Dig into the details of that. I don't know, but it's a good place to at least have you guys take a look at that when you get a chance. Christine, you're right up on these things, so you may already have a sense where the system is not working.
Well, the end of that letter is what Hohenstein's trying to avoid as well. You can see Hohenstein's asking for a list of revised procedures signed by Sunoco senior management for all future HDD activity to ensure that they have to submit accurate notice prior to any changes in drilling procedures,
Okay.
combining of drills, dual pipe pulls, expansion of drill radius, or any other changes, because DEP doesn't want to be the last to know either, again. And so the interesting thing is the only reason why we caught them on this is because 520 was subject to the Clean Air Council settlement, because there were multiple IRs there. These other sites, they're not having to report on. So there's no documentation that you could pull from the DEP website. So my guess is that they never told DEP that they were gonna do dual pipe over there at all these other multiple locations, which is why I sent Hohenstein that letter that they sent to all the residents detailing where they were gonna do dual pipe pull, which I think was probably news to them there as well.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Okay. Next correspondence. We have,
So Adelphia has to get a general, if you cause Adelphia will be working in the wetlands or floodplain, they need to get a general permit. So they provided us, and in order to apply for general permit, you have to notify the municipality that you're going to apply to DEP. So we have been now notified that the Adelphia will be applying for a general permit to do work on DEP.
all right, we have correspondence, the third quarter right to know report.
Yep.
I didn't see anything terribly unusual there.
Yeah.
The one lady continues to request the information that's readily available on the website, but it's a great system.
But she asks every month.
She does.
She
Well,
sends the
I get a
same-
fax, we get a fax every month.
Okay. We have a recap of the November 9th e-waste event. And we did better.
It was good.
We,
And we scheduled to 2022. So those dates will be on the website shortly.
I've talked to Rick about this very briefly. I think it would be a great idea, at least annually, to have a paper, one of these things where you can even get a shredder come in. Because I'm sure that people have a lot of documents that shouldn't be just blatantly put out in the trash, that they should be shredded. And I know that some of the towns have done this, it's been pretty successful. I don't know if we need to do it every year, but it'd be interesting to see if we could do it and see what the results were.
I mean, I guess we could call Wiggins and have them come down and do it. The issue is, I think that a lot of private businesses will do that too. I mean, we there's no value proposition to the township. I mean, we can price it. I'm happy to price it out.
$5. Well, I mean,
We
it
do
may
one
may or may not be worthwhile, but I think we want to just investigate. and
We do
see,
one on our.
Because I think it is a service that.
Okay,
that
I'll price it.
Get a price.
The other thing too, Jen, I don't know if everybody got the same thing. Rick and I went back and forth a little bit on people use and how to present them, given the fact that we have a contract with Bloomberry. And there's some information he put on this one. There may be some things that are added, but I think everybody ought to take a look at this at least briefly, because it gives a lot of information about what's really happening with respect to where the action is in the police department, notwithstanding the fact that we want to make sure that Bloomberry gets what they are supposed to get and not a whole lot more. And it seems to be that the people down there that are doing the scheduling are doing a pretty doggone job of this, because it looks like it's about right where it should be, on the plus side just a little bit. So I think that's really good, but I think I encourage everybody to look at this. Is this to send out to us? I assume the police commission sees it first, so.
Marty, if I could, police commission meets tomorrow. We do discuss it, and we do, some months, you can't help it. It's all event driven, it's emergency driven.
Oh, yeah.
But what they try to do, if we have what I'll call a heavy event month in any of the townships, is the following month, or when they can, they try to adjust it back. John, one question, I'm back on the recycling. Marty jumped ahead of me too quick. I heard something that TVs are no longer thinking about not being accepted, the large screen.
I
you
have not heard
anything?
anything about that. It was nothing like that was communicated. So we've already confirmed the 2020 dates, and I believe we have a contract for that. So there has been no discussion about the vendor that we use, banning TVs. I mean, honestly, if TVs go, that was the main driver of it, because the hauler won't accept TVs. So, I mean, if TVs go, then we have to maybe think about
What do you pay for it?
I understand. I had a resident call me and said they wouldn't accept it, and I said, I can't believe that. I think they got bad information.
Yeah, I don't.
Now, there is a
I don't
charge.
know that. Yeah,
There
they
is a
charge. Yeah.
So it's not a freebie.
Yeah.
I'll get back to the resident and ask them, to check it out, but there's nothing in the wind about that that you heard of. Thank you.
anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to the update on the Fairleigh Pike Trail. I don't know where I've been, but I didn't realize that PennDOT was gonna be opening the bids on this, segment. Yeah, PennDOT, yeah. But it was interesting to look at the spread of the bidders. And what that says to me is that there's and interestingly enough, our engineer's estimate was very close to the winning bid. It was only $10,000 off, which for $2.5 million is pretty darn good. But this, when you have a spread with the bidders like this, it shows the potential going forward of, some of the uncertainty that we've been talking about. Alan Myers, of course, came in at 2.4 mil, but then you've got one all the way up to 3.2 mil. That's $800,000 difference. That's a big deal. And the other two in between are, the next close one to Myers was $500,000 more, And then the third bidder away from the best bid was again close to $700,000 away from the winning bid. So it goes to show these big projects, there's volatility in them, and thank goodness for Al Myers. Because they have a lot on their plate, as big as they are.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion. PK.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Daily double.
Let's go to that train and see if David picked up after himself when he got into the station. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, it was 55.
What's up? Sure. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
One of those things was
Are you gonna congratulate me on my?
Really?